What if a mirror could do more than just reflect your image? Imagine that it could reveal to you an entire world, a forgotten world, where someone else's secrets begin to blur the line between your dreams and reality. Think about it. What if it's more than just glass? What if it hides an entire past within itself? What if your reflection isn't just a mirror? What if it lures you not to reveal the truth, but to weave it darkly into your life? Mirrors have always been present in these gloomy homes. They seem to watch hidden entities behind the walls. However, the story I'm about to tell you will be different. You have to be ready, because once this ancient mirror world reveals its secrets to you, there will be no way out. This isn't a story about what happens to your reflection. It's about how a parallel world can disrupt your life. After all, every mirror has a dark side. Alexa moved into an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, a place where she could lose herself and hide from the outside world. But the dark corners and dusty rooms, the old, untouched items, all of it was meant to lead her to the terror that awaited her in the shadows. There, among the broken wood on the attic floor, she found an ancient mirror. It promised nothing special, yet there was something sinister about it. The frame was covered in dark stains, and the glass had been worn by time. Alexa even thought that the mirror was stood in something ancient and inexplicable. And then, in an instant, when she glanced into it, her reflection twisted. She didn't see her own face, but the face of a woman, with delicate features, cloudy eyes, and graying hair. She appeared to be dead, but why did her gaze seem so alive within that glass? Alexa tried to look away, but it was as though her eyes were glued to the mirror. The woman, as if predicting her next move, also moved her lips, beginning to utter a word. Alexa couldn't understand. This wasn't just a reflection. It was as if the mirror belonged to another world, where everything followed different rules, but still affected her world. The realization came slowly. At first, Alexa thought it was just a trick of the mind, but soon it became clear. When she looked into the mirror, she wasn't just seeing a forgotten past, but the life of another person. The life of a woman who had wandered through this house in a different time. Everything that seemed strange to her perception became real. In the dead of night, when darkness fell outside, this woman was there, in the mirror, not merely a reflection. Her movements began to synchronize with reality. But what was even more terrifying, this woman in the mirror seemed to know her, and Alexa began noticing eerie coincidences. Simple things she did. Setting the table, closing windows, turning around, all of it began mirroring what the woman in the mirror did. And the most horrifying part, these coincidences felt more and more impossible. Alexa couldn't control herself. She tried to convince herself that it was all a coincidence, but each time her gaze met the darkness of the mirror, she felt its power pulling her in. The next step was fear. It enveloped every moment of her life. This woman began appearing in her dreams. Alexa stood in front of the mirror, and behind her, it seemed there was a figure with glowing eyes. Beneath the black veil of her face, a shadow of something else hid, something that couldn't be seen clearly, something that moved through the nights with no understanding of stopping. Alexa tried to take refuge, but every night when she looked into the mirror, she found her, the same as in the mirror, with glowing eyes. And that's when Alexa realized it was too late. The letter left in her past would not let her escape. Time seemed to thicken, and Alexa couldn't tell whether the events happening to her were real or if she was hopelessly losing herself in her own mind. The woman in the mirror was no longer just a watcher. She was beginning to actively interfere with her world. One morning, upon waking, Alexa noticed that her skin seemed to be covered in strange spots. Dark, unnatural markings, as if someone had left their trace on her body, leaving bloody patterns on her hands. Fear in her soul turned into horror, and then her mind realized this woman wasn't just frightening her, she was manipulating her. She was literally influencing reality. Avoiding the mirror, Alexa began noticing strange things. She started hearing whispers from the shadows, voices barely audible. She tried to ignore it, but the more she stared into the world within the mirror, the clearer they became. And one night, the woman's eyes appeared in her room. Not in the mirror, but in the air, spectral, shimmering, standing behind her. They moved everywhere, then aligned in one spot. It seemed their number was only increasing. Every morning, before leaving her room, Alexa would approach the mirror, and each morning, she would see how her reflection became more and more distorted. Now when she looked, she noticed that what was happening in the mirror seemed like a nightmare intertwining past and present. Behind the woman in the mirror stood inhuman figures. Shadowy, monstrous eyes that wouldn't leave her alone. The feeling of being chased grew stronger. It felt as though the mirror was no longer just a window, but a doorway to some parallel nightmare that was closing in, day by day. But that was not all. After the nightly nightmares, Alexa would increasingly see the woman standing next to her in the most ordinary places. By the mirror on the wall, in the dark corner of the kitchen, in the hallway. But they were always whispering something. Alexa realized that now even the world around her was changing. The walls had become menacing and unnatural. The light grew dim, making any movement, whether it was her own hands or the shifting lights and shadows, seem meaningless. Strangely, the rooms of the house began taking shapes Alexa hadn't seen before, with parts of old elements and wardrobes creaking with metal sounds. Fear gradually turned into phobia. Every step she took around the house echoed ominously, as though she were surrounded by her former fears. Loud footsteps behind doors and small knocks on the walls accompanied her every moment. But when she managed to distract herself from the mirror, she felt it again. She wasn't alone. These endless echoes, every sound seemed linked to the idea that whatever was beyond the mirror had crossed the boundary. The beasts and monsters hiding in the dim corners of the house started to emerge, stretching their twisted limbs from behind the dusty covers. At some point, Alexa's world began to warp and lose its solidity. With every glance into the mirror, things became worse. Her once clear mind grew clouded. She couldn't tell what from her past she was experiencing and what was foreign to her. The power of the looming chorus of terrifying creatures closing in from all directions pushed her to the edge of madness. Alexa tried several times to figure out how to escape and conquer this nightmare. The woman in the mirror remained untouchable, gazing at her from beyond. Then she discovered another horrifying detail. The mirrors didn't just follow her, but they affected her perception of reality. When she turned back into her room during a late-night venture from her bed, eyes began appearing in the windows, and even the most ghostly figures, no matter which objects had been watching her, started ringing with coldness. Things had reached a point where Alexa began to lose the line between reality and nightmare. She could no longer be sure that there was even one place where she hadn't encountered this evil. The woman in the mirror became unmistakably real, her face no longer twisted. She looked directly at Alexa, as though knowing that her fear had become a force, one she now used for her own purposes. And whenever Alexa decided to close her eyes and escape, her reflection continued to follow her, maintaining its menacing presence. It had already infiltrated her dreams and nightmares, leaving its mark on the world. Time lost all meaning. Every moment was consumed by unbearable tension, the thought that her mind was broken and completely controlled by this dark force. The woman in the mirror no longer just watched her, she had embedded herself in Alexa's life. Nightly walks around the house had become dangerous. Ominous whispers and unknown shadows now filled the corridors. Emotions hung on the edge, and thoughts plunged deeper into the dark void. Familiar things, the details of her past, now seemed foreign, and each time they terrified her with the unknown world that enveloped everything. One evening, desperate and hoping for even a little relief from this constant pressure, Alexa made a terrible decision. She would try to destroy the mirror. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was stronger than fear. It wasn't just about getting rid of a physical object. It was about destroying everything connected to the nightmare. But as soon as she shattered the mirror, the fog in the room only thickened. Darkness consumed everything around her, and the woman from the mirror now stood before her as a vision. This horror would not end, but it continued to invade her dreams. Each night, the darkness surrounding the woman in the mirror grew stronger. Alexa tried not to sleep, but when her eyes closed, the dark creatures crawling from beyond the glass still found her. Each night increasingly foretold her doom. Strange figures appeared in the corners of the room when the lights were out, taking away the eerie fragments of memory that remained after her brief, desperate attempts to fight back. Ghosts had begun to rule her mind. The terrible truth was fully revealed. Alexa realized that the woman was not a ghost of the past. She was something that was invisibly tied to this world. She had taken what was hidden in it and deprived Alexa of everything. The ghosts and monsters that came from the mirror had not disappeared. They had become her constant companions. And as long as there was any chance of fighting back, everything revolved around what they saw. A living life filled with torment, as though it were destined to remain in an endless loop. Every glance, every movement destroyed the lives that once meant so much. At some point, when the creaking of ancient wooden boards echoed in the attic once again, Alexa understood. If she didn't break her limits this time, if she didn't face her reflection in the mirror, and what was even more crucial, didn't tear apart the inevitable death that had cast a shadow over each day of her life, she would lose her last chance. She tried to find an exit in all of this. The room was in chaos. Night. The final glance of the woman behind her, and her reality understood. They were leaving her, further and further, hiding in the darkness words more important to her than her entire life. When everything was nearly decided and the last chance was drowned in fear, and her final terror-stricken pulses dulled, with emotions fading into an empty horizon, you must understand this. The fear that resided within this life, which could step beyond a new boundary of reality, is never forgotten. And if you enjoy such dark tales, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. We are always happy to see your friends on our channel.